We're here because we want an Assembly and Senate supported initiative called the Home Stability Support Program, known as HSS, so that we can have a new rental assistance voucher that will be the difference between homelessness and housing, displacement and safety and security, and health and illness for New Yorkers all across the state. Now, we're going to be here until we're forced to leave, and some of us are going to refuse to do so. We are willing to take an arrest politically, morally, because homelessness is the manifestation of our state not recognizing us as human beings. Right? Those of us like myself who have experienced homelessness, we're going to continue to share our stories. We have an audience online. We want to tell the people over and over and every detail matters. Because these are the experiences of our people. Yeah. These are the experiences of the 89,000. Yeah.
Thank you for everything, Laura. Some of the stuff I got done was because of you, and I can't tell you how grateful I am to you. You've always going to have a special little place in my heart.
Aww.
My heart is broken, so there ain't much places there, so a little broken all up.
Aww.
But you got just a little piece there that says, Laura is a hero in disguise. She really is an angel in disguise. And I believe that.
Wow.
I've been with United Tenants of Albany now collectively for 4 years. My job title with the organization is the Homeless Prevention Program Coordinator. And United Tenants is a small nonprofit organization that fights housing instability kind of on a number of levels. So we have direct services that include a housing hotline which responds to 5,000 calls from tenants across the state who are dealing with housing instability. We help them kind of maneuver different processes that they might be able to utilize to enforce their rights. We've got a court advocacy service, an emergency rental assistance service that helps folks with a one-time payment towards their back rent to keep them stably housed. We assist tenants that are in foreclosing properties, and we also have some larger level services that combat housing instability, where we engage in legislative and political advocacy to try to increase tenants' rights through public policy. And then we also have a leadership role in the Housing for All campaign, which is a local community organizing campaign that seeks to increase folks' access to affordable housing.
Yeah, no, I can do that about that too.
Given me proof that you'll be able to pay moving forward, which would be
Alrighty, now I see you have some questions about tenants' rights.
I mean, first of all, there are many women who are heads of households, and so they're the sole financial source for their families. And, you know, women don't make as much money as men. And if you look, you know, a lot of the people we talk to on the hotline, $12, $13 an hour. If you're netting, let's say, $1,200 a month maybe, and your rent's $900 a month, and you got to pay utilities, you are in constant crisis. And I think women, you know, realize that they have the responsibility of holding their families together, and how much of a struggle it is. So actually you hear more women say, we got to have rent protections than men.
Because your dime is better invested in programs that lift people up, that give people opportunities, okay? It's not a pick yourself up from your bootstraps. bootstrap type of situation. Not everyone is given the same resources. Not everyone's starting off with the same things, okay? And that needs to be addressed. People need to stop ignoring it. People are one paycheck away from being homeless, okay? That is a reality. I don't want to hear about how our unemployment rate is down, so we must be doing so well as an economy, okay? What does that employment look like? It looks like a single mother working 80 hours a week just to afford a studio apartment for her and her 2 kids. That's what the employment looks like. That's the employment that people are bragging about going up. Someone having to work 2 jobs just to take care of their home, pay their rent, and take care of their children if they're lucky, okay? You can't even have both parents with an opportunity to go get work or go get jobs or anything because they're at home taking care of their kids because child care is not affordable. All these issues are intersectional.
No justice, no peace. No more homeless on the streets. No justice, no peace. No more homeless on the streets. No justice, no peace.
It is an issue. Homelessness is real, and it's just continuing to perpetuate because look how much it costs to have an apartment, to have a housing that people deserve to have. Like, I'm all for families being intact. I'm not with the whole thing of how systematic it is that, okay, in order for you to receive this grant, this person can't be on your case and all this other type of stuff. It's like, where do you come at and balance that out where you say, yes, families should stay together? So the system now and the laws that are coming around with affordable housing and everything, and being able to supply us with these units that say, yes, you can have your whole system. You know, those are the things that I feel like where we're growing at. You cannot particularly think that through all these years of the market continuing to increase, and families are being displaced, for you to think that 501 or 685 and all this other stuff will do something to help a family get into the best housing that would be afforded to them. That's not fair, because you're putting them right back into poverty. You're putting them right back into a community that is not going to help uplift them and move them out of it. It's going to keep them right there and suck them in. And if anybody has a drug addiction, you can forget about it. They are going to perpetuate the system, and then they are going to appear to be a repeat offender, because guess what? You still putting them back into the same environment that they're trying to run from. So no, it's not going to work. Okay, so the laws that are governing certain things, they work on one hand, and then also they are capped to keep people exactly right where they are at. And I truly believe that. They persevere. The people who really want to work hard towards, you know, all the adversities and the things that are being thrown at them at that particular time, they definitely push through those barriers and say, no, you know what? You're right. I do deserve to have what this system is allowing me to have, and I'm not going to allow somebody to just belittle me and talk down to me and act as if, you know, just because I'm a woman or I'm a woman of color or something like that, that I'm not worthy and that I deserve less than, you know, or I'm untrustworthy, because that definitely has come up where you're speaking to a professional, the professional like, oh, I really don't believe the story that they're telling. Really? Did you speak to them? Did you talk to them? Probably not. And if you haven't, as their advocate, that's my role, to be their voice if they do not feel that they have a voice in that moment.
The level to which we're contending with unstable housing is unacceptable. Most of the folks living in these upstate cities are renting, more than half, and those same folks do not have access to well-paying jobs most of the time. So we're having to deal with housing instability up front no matter what, because the rents are unaffordable. But then to compound that with having condition issues, decaying housing stock, and an ineffective system for folks to assert themselves to a decent place to live, it's just too much.
Once someone comes up on the waiting list, we verify there's certain criteria that they would have to meet, obviously. One is that they, at that time that their application comes on, they would have to have been working 9 out of the last 12 months or unable to work due to age or disability. And once we have verified that that's the case and that they're income eligible, that they fall below a certain area, and that they don't have an extensive criminal background, then we're able to assist them. But the waiting list is quite long, and right now it's probably at about 5 years. We were open from last Monday to last Friday, and in that period of time, we amassed over 5,000 applications. We had to open our waiting list because our list had gotten below 1,200 applications, and at that point we had to open because once it's in our admin plan that we have to open if the waiting list gets below 1,200.
So, newspaper, started calling places that were in my budget. And I started off being really honest and saying to people, hey, I have Section 82 accepted, and I got a lot of no's. At that point, I kind of realized that there was a huge stigma associated with it, which I couldn't understand because it wasn't welfare. It was you had to work to qualify for it, and they were all for bettering yourself if you could. The feeling I was getting is that they didn't trust that I would take care of the apartment. That I almost kind of was like a lowlife, if you will. It kind of didn't feel good because they'd be all about telling me about the apartment on the phone, and then I would be like, oh, do you accept Section 8? No, we don't accept welfare. Well, it's not welfare, it's Section 8, it's different. And they wouldn't be willing to do it. It was really when I got smarter than them, and the first time I actually didn't lead with, telling them on the phone that I had it, and I went to the apartment and I established a relationship because I wasn't a lowlife, and people aren't. Section 8 was willing to help with any part of what your goals are. And that's really awesome. It sucks that there's such a waiting list for it now. But if you are on it and you've waited, use it for every single thing it can give you. Because at the end, you can end up exactly where you want.
I think when I first started here at Legal Aid in 2012, most of my clients had rents between maybe $600 and $800, and now you can't find an apartment for $600. But the standard of need chart, which I have here, which covers Albany and some of the other counties, shows that if you're a family of, let's say, 3, your shelter allowance is $309. And you'll get $389 for basic needs. And that's it. And a little chart here that I have for the local Department of Social Services says that a family of 3 should find an apartment that's heated for $600. And that's not been updated since I started working here in 2012. And now in 2019, if you find an apartment for $750, you're lucky. The rents have gone up, and I understand that the mortgages, the water bills, and other costs for landlords have gone up, but my client's income has not gone up for the most part, and the conditions of the housing hasn't gotten better, even though they're paying more rent. So it's a vicious cycle of poverty. Health problems caused by substandard conditions, women working really hard, and so I remember I had a client, before she went to work in the morning, she had 3 kids and had to put them on 3 separate buses, and then she had to get to work on time so she wouldn't get in trouble, and then she has to worry about childcare, And childcare is very expensive if you can't get it through social services, which is very rare to get it through social services. And then people are deciding what they're going to spend their money on: food, rent, childcare. So yeah, it's tough for a lot of women.
This is a problem that exists, I think, for a reason. It exists because folks are making money off of the oppression of others. Eviction is a business model that's super profitable for some of the worst landlords that you could ever imagine. They're making a killing off it.
I'd rather for them to be in a warm place than me. I never was in a shelter. I never lived in a shelter. Last year was my first year at the House of Mercy. I'm just letting you know it's cold. And if we can help, we'll help them. And if I was rich, I'll help anybody. I'll get them a shirt off my back. Just to keep them warm.
No justice, no peace, no more homeless on the streets. No justice, no peace, no more homeless on the streets. No justice, no peace.
So when we have renters who interface with us that are dealing with housing issues, either on the hotline or in person with court cases and homeless prevention cases, where folks come in and they're dealing with code issues, code violations, the first thing that we tell them is just to make sure that they've communicated with their landlord and that they've done so in writing. But from there, really commonly landlords are not responsive when there's issues like this. So we then sort of teach tenants how it is that they can interface with our code enforcement system, our buildings department. We maintain a pretty close relationship with our buildings department now. Originally, when this organization formed, it was in response to there being virtually no code enforcement in this city. So we are happy now that we've got a pretty active buildings department. So we help tenants engage with code enforcement and go through that process to put their landlord on notice and hopefully get the repairs done.
I work for the Corporation Counsel's Office for the City of Albany. What we do is when the City of Albany Buildings Department sends out a notice of a code violation and it's not fixed by the date that the Buildings Department says the violation needs to be fixed by, they'll send it into court so that a fine can be imposed. I'm the one who oversees that process. The rules that we enforce, they come from the New York State Building Code, and the New York State Building Code is meant to ensure that buildings are safe and habitable. And the tenants are the residents of the buildings are the ones that are most affected by that. So hearing their perspective on a particular code violation is extremely important. Because, when I get the notice of violation, when I get the paperwork from the buildings department, it'll say, okay, well, there's been a violation of, the code that says your faucet can't be leaking, for instance. And I'll see that, and that might mean one thing to me, but for the tenant, they might be experiencing mold issues. It may be something that they've been trying to get their landlord to fix for a long time. So the perspective that they have as really the victims of the code violation is extremely important to informing the process once the case gets to me. I think the system fails tenants in that tenants are sometimes reluctant to call code enforcement because they feel like their landlord might take it out on them. And I think the protections for tenants in that kind of a situation, they could be strengthened. You know, our resources as a city are, we can bring someone to an apartment. We can have, again, that third party look at the code violation and issue the notice of violation. But obviously there's a lot of, you know, places outside of that kind of context that the tenant needs help with. And it would be good to be able to provide protection there as well.
A retaliatory eviction is where a landlord seeks the eviction of a tenant in response to their engaging in one of sort of 3 protected activities. So a tenant's protected where they either form or engage with a tenant association, where they enforce their rights by taking legal action to protect a right that they have that's afforded to them under a lease agreement or by public policy, or where a tenant makes a good faith complaint to a municipal authority based on the landlord's violation of some kind of a code or law. So what this law sort of does, and it's a law that United Tenants fought tooth and nail for back in the 80s to get that passed, but what this law does is it says that where a landlord does this, then the tenant can claim in court that there's been retaliation, that the landlord is seeking eviction with a retaliatory motive. The problem with the law is that the landlord can then rebut this or argue against it by just largely pulling anything out of thin air and saying that there's some other reason, any other reason, that they're seeking the eviction of the tenant. So in the years that I've worked here, the most ridiculous case of a retaliatory eviction that I've seen is the one that was faced by Ms. Wallace. Ms. Wallace is and was then a model tenant, this wonderful mother who was dealing with condition issues at her apartment that were largely characterized as security issues, where she was having problems with her front door and previous to that a window, where, you know, as a single mom, to have that type of a condition issue where you're worried about the security of your apartment, it's just unacceptable. And so she's trying to get the landlord to be responsive to these issues. Eventually she has to take action and she calls code enforcement, and oddly enough, within a week or so she receives an eviction notice.
I was sitting there doing homework one day and all of a sudden water dripped down on my laptop. And I'm like, okay. And noticed there was a crack, and the crack grew over like a 2-week period. So she said that she had her handyman go upstairs and check there wasn't a leak. I'm like, it's coming from somewhere. She just didn't want to do anything about it. They sent the report, and then immediately the next day, she came down and served me with an eviction notice. And I'm like, how could this be? You know, she said, Taffany, that this retaliatory law has been, it was just recently won by another tenant, and she says, I'm sure, you know, you have a really good chance. You know, and I'm thinking, it's in the middle of winter. I can't go anywhere. I have to fight this, you know? So, you know, they prepared, and we took it to trial, and we won. We won.
When I marched on Washington, me and Cameron were there with Martin Luther King in 1963. All right, Father. We were marching for jobs, justice, and fair housing. We're still marching. That ain't right. That ain't right. More homeless now than the Great Depression. Come on. Most people don't know this. Sunday night I was in the hospital. I had to get a blood transfusion. 3 years in the shelter, my blood count was 6. The doctor said to me, if you do not go to the hospital today, you can't go no place Tuesday. Your blood count should be 12. It's 6. So the diet is so bad in the shelter I live in Obviously, I'm not getting enough protein, so it's like some kind of acute anemia or something.
That ain't right.
That put me in the hospital for the first time since 22, when I had a lens put in my eye. I've never been in the hospital. I've never been sick like this.
The most common housing condition type issues that we're seeing renters face here in Albany really largely have to do with the fact that the housing stock here in the city is quite literally falling down around folks, especially folks that are low income. So we have structural issues where, we're having issues where the ceilings are falling down, the walls are not stable, the floors are not stable, which kind of compound with where there's going to be leaks then because there's going to be issues with the structure of a roof. And then those leaks then cause mold in the apartments. And so folks are having to deal with housing conditions that disproportionately impact their health, in that where there's mold in your apartment, you might have trouble breathing. Where your ceiling is falling down, it might be impacting your material belongings and causing your belongings to be destroyed and causing you a great deal of stress. And where you have structural issues in your apartment, you just don't feel safe. You don't feel comfortable where you're living.
If you were making $1,200 a month and had to pay $900 rent plus your utility bill to National Grid, get to work and try to keep it all together, would you not be stressed out? I mean, I get stressed out hearing people. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times when I've been on the hotline hearing women, start to cry because they can't, it's so frightening to them that they're going to lose the roof over their head with their kids and may have to go into shelter. That does a number on your body. I mean, it makes you scared, stressed, which leads to a lot of physical symptoms. Yes, it does a number, absolutely. Housing, if you don't have housing security, you certainly are in a lot more stressful position.
You're stressed, you're going through a crisis. Maybe you have undiagnosed mental health. Maybe you're still dealing with a domestic situation and you're trying to heal from that. Maybe there's PTSD some way, shape, or form. And the way that it comes out, and what I have witnessed, is the fact of, someone being extremely shut down to the point where you have to go in and check on them and make sure that they're okay, and then start setting up those services in the community in order for them to get the resources that they need to get them out of that state of depression. Or you have someone who consistently is eating because they're just overcompensating for the fact that, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I know I'm here, I know Ms. Shea and everybody is helping. However, this is my issue, this is my problem. So they just, they overeat and they gain weight while they're here. Or to the next level of full of aggression and wants to lash out at the people that are the closest to them and that are trying to help them. So then it ends up being something on that level. Or to the very negative, where the person ends up going and smoking and using drugs and alcohol, and they confiscate and to try to suppress some of the pain that they're feeling. And those are some of the things I have actually witnessed and seen. And it's like, okay, we're not just going to kick you out. We're going to talk with you and try to problem solve and see whether or not, first off, do you want help? And is there anything else that we can do to help to empower you? So those stresses, we could bear some of that burden for them.
I have so many clients sitting, here at my desk crying, because they're very stressed out. They're facing eviction. They've got children. They don't want to go to a shelter. Some of them have been to shelters and they don't want to go back. It's another cycle of having mental health issues and then getting evicted and having more mental health issues and physical issues. The one good thing about New York is that most of my clients do have health care, as opposed to some of my colleagues in other states where they don't have a good Medicaid system. And I'm sure that our system could be better, but at least most of my clients do seem to have health care. But the problems of poverty obesity issues contribute to problems of people not being able to move around maybe as much as they could. Poor air quality in their apartments. A lot of my clients are facing respiratory issues, asthma, that's created by substandard conditions and poverty issues. So it's stressful, and stress causes anxiety. And so you have a whole slew of problems for people that are poverty driven.
I could not believe what happened to her. And, we started to really go into the details of what she had dealt with, and there was absolutely no way that we weren't going to file a claim. So, I started to talk to her about her rights and, how she had been wronged in a way that wasn't just sort of obviously morally wrong, but it was illegal what she had dealt with. And so the first thing I did was try to call around to see if an attorney would take the case, but I could not find a lawyer to take it. So where United Tenants often has to step in is to fill in that gap and somehow try to scrape together a claim and get through that court process to try to help folks access some kind of justice when they've been so horribly wronged. I haven't seen anybody as horribly wronged as Ms. Johnson was.
And that's when he tried to fix up the property, but then ended up being like the gas. He tried to put a gas line in the apartment. So when he put these heaters in, there was no place for the vents to go. So it's like we was breathing in heat, didn't know no knowledge of nothing. Then codes came and they inspected the place and was like, well, you gotta move immediately. You have 30 days. I'm like, okay. So and at that time I was pregnant with my son and everything. But I thank God that I made it. My son had little difficulties, like developmental. He's small. I don't know if that's from, what I was. And, but thank God he didn't have nothing else that was real deep,
I think one of the most amazing things about Ms. Johnson is how resilient she is with what she had to deal with that landlord. She never stops smiling. She never stops being hopeful. She's inspired me so much in this job, just having kind of gone through that process with her and winning the case, and now not having seen a dime of the money, but we will find that landlord. I don't doubt that.
Don't let nobody tell you different. Reach for the skies because it's unlimited. So that's how I always, brighter days ahead.
I was arrested at 9 p.m. When all the sessions had closed and all the legislators had left, they were attempted to close the building. And we said, well, we're not leaving because the governor has not committed to this, and we're not going to just lay down and let them do whatever they want to our communities. So after they asked everybody to leave, 12 of us, we stayed after they closed the Capitol on the second floor there. And people, it was just very powerful. People had sat down and they linked arms together, linked up and continued to chant for half an hour or hour, and then they eventually they came for us, you know, and they, instead of negotiating, instead of actually working towards ending homelessness, at least put us on a path, they came and began to arrest us. So I was arrested first. You know, they took me, put handcuffs on me, put me in a police car, and drove me to the state, you know, New York State Police Station in the Capitol building. As you know, police are coming for folks, other people are cheering for each other, you know. So even in this dark, sort of oppressive environment where police are coming in and they're trying to control people and silence people, people couldn't be silenced. And even when, you know, I'd been released and the police were bringing more people in to be booked, people were cheering, you know, and some people were chanting that we're in handcuffs, you know. So it kind of flips what they want, because, you know, so much of society is based on to keep us in our place.
There's absolutely a tenant movement at this point, because we're sick of it. I mean, why are people having to face eviction at these astronomical levels? Housing is a basic need that is at the very center of our lives. And you only have to deal with unstable housing one time to sort of join, I think, the movement and to say, like, this can't be happening.
They are preventative measures that are in place, which there's funding now, but it's not enough. So now, since we are educating people on the amount of the cost of living and what needs to happen, so those family knows where those resources are. And they won't have to wait to then get a letter from the person that they lived with to say, oh, I have to take this to DSS because that's the only way I'm gonna get into the homeless unit is if I have a letter that states I can't stay here with you no more or something like that. So having these preventative funds in place when something like that happen, and be it educating the churches, educating the people at the schools, the social workers that's at the schools to say, hey, if you notice a kid is coming in here with the same clothes on, or tackling that initially, and being more receptive to truly seeing the families and for who they are and speaking with them and keeping it open so that people feel comfortable enough to feel like, you know what, I have a support system at my school. The libraries, oh, I see resources that tell me, oh my God, if you are facing eviction or if you are facing this, that, and the third. The communication and the education has to be out there, because there are resources, but nobody knows how to access them. So if you have no knowledge of it and how to access it, or maybe you just illiterate and you can't even read it. All right. So these are the things that are like, do you really know the children and their families as they're coming into school? Because kids spend more time in school than anything. Okay. So that's where it's at. And what about so the moms that don't have the kids and everything like that in their custody, should they be the forgotten because they no longer have their kids with them? No. There are things where people can go to pantries. There should be information on all levels of these, even in the prisons. That's where they're at. They may be visiting some people there. Why not have social workers and support systems there that says there are preventative funds or there are things there? So until those things change and so those things are in place where people are actually speaking about it and it's not taboo anymore, it's the only way that things are going to kind of shift. But definitely the funding has to be there, wholeheartedly.
The tenants that I work with are the most brave, courageous folks I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. I mean, and I think that for these folks to have to deal with housing instability is such a waste of their energy and their potential. Like, you know, especially, I think in particular, the women that I'm working with who are, you know, facing eviction and fighting evictions, they're brilliant and they're so resilient. And it's amazing to see how, you know, somebody could have been up all night, kept awake by some kind of infestation that maybe they have, and the next morning when they show up for court, they're still ready to fight and to interface with the system that's often made pretty inaccessible to them, but to get through it and to win those cases more or less on their own. It's amazing that people can get through this kind of stuff and come out of it even stronger.
Most of the leadership over the years at United Tenants has been women. Presidents of our board, one of the other groups we organized in the late 70s with this really horrible landlord, where young women came together to fight. It was all women. So yeah, the women should be proud of what they've done for the housing movement, and it'll get even better going forward, I think.
People are needed in this field, and the right people are needed in this field in order to make change, and government and policy, all of the above. All right, so for sure.
With what little resources we do have, we have to keep fighting, and we have to maintain and grow this movement of solidarity that we've been building, and remember that housing is a human right, and that to be housed stably is to have basic dignity, and we all deserve that. The forces that we're having to battle when we're addressing housing instability, they have more money and they have more capital than we do. But I do believe that we have more strength and we certainly have more heart.